Today I'm going to show you how to make this necklace. Now I have used crystal quartz and I've used a lot of them. You can use any kind of crystal you want. You could use Chinese crystal, you could use little tiny pearls, you could use little tiny fire polish beads, you could use anything you wanted. It doesn't have to be crystal quartz. You can use rondelles, you can use rounds, you can use whatever you want. It's the technique that matters with this, not so much the beads. So pick out something pretty. You could even make like a strand of pearls, a strand of crystals, and a strand of something else. It doesn't matter. But I did mine with crystal quartz because it's Christmas time and this is the bead that my mother likes, and I made this for her. This is a 30-inch necklace. It's a nice long necklace that hangs down in front like so. It's really pretty with a sweater or something like that. I've also made a couple of beaded beads to put on it, and I will show you how to make those. This is a stringing and stitching project combined because we stitch the beaded beads and we string everything else. So it's crimping, stringing, and stitching. And let's go ahead and look and see what we'll need for this project today. Okay, for this project today we will be stitching and we will be stringing. So we'll need several different things. We'll also be doing a little bit of wire wrapping. We're going to start with 4 strands of 14-inch beading wire. And for my beading wire, I am using a finer diameter, and it's 0.18 inch, or let me get you close, 0.46 millimeter. This is 7 beadalon. You can use any finer type of stringing wire. You don't want to use a really thick one for this project. You can use soft flex, you can use tiger's tail, you can use whatever you'd like that is flexible and somewhat fine. Then you will also cut 2 12-inch pieces of wire. So 4 14-inch, 2 12-inch. And I'm just clipping them and setting them aside. And then to make your beaded bead, it's helpful to have a dowel. You can find anything that's round. You can even wrap up a piece of paper nice and tightly to use for your beaded bead. You do not necessarily have to have one. I make them all the time without one. However, to show you it's easier, you can see it better, and it looks more organized if you use a dowel. So that's what I'm going to do for my beaded bead that we're going to make for this project, and we will be making 2 actually. Then we will be using, let me get us back into focus here. We are going to be using 11-0 seed beads. Mine is a Toho and it is the galvanized silver tone. And then you will need 1 head pin just to make a little decoration for the end of our clasping. We will also be using some crimp beads. I am using a size 1 round crimp bead. Now, if you want to use a size 2, you can, but you will need a pair of crimping pliers and crimp it properly to use a size 2 so that it squishes down small. I am going to use a size 1, as I said, and I'm just going to use my flat or chain nose pliers to squish it instead of actually using the crimping tool. But you can, as I said. I'm also going to be using a small piece of chain. This is just a couple inches of just some link chain, and a lobster claw clasp. Of course, you can use any type of clasping you would like. You will also need about 18 4mm round crystal beads. I am using a Swarovski 4mm round clear crystal bead. You will need 2 inches of 20 gauge soft wire so that you can make your loops to string onto. This is a little over 2 inches, actually. It's about 2.5 inches each. Then I am going to be using some quartz crystal rondelles. They're more of a saucer shape. You can use some regular rondelles, Chinese crystal, whatever you want to use. You do not even have to use crystal for this. You can use any type of bead you want. Just make sure that they aren't really big beads. So you can do anything from probably 4 millimeter, maybe even 6 millimeter beads if you'd like, but 4 would be the best. Rondelles for this project work very well, so I am using rondelles. And I'm actually using two sizes. I'm using a smaller rondelle and then a little bit bigger size rondelle, if I can pick one up. And these, like I said, are quartz crystal faceted, and this is going to be a gemstone necklace. So you can use, like I said, anything you would like to use for this project. It's the technique that matters more than the type of beads. If you cannot find faceted quartz crystal rondelles, saucer shape type of rondelles like I have, then just use something else. It's fine. You will also need to have your chain nose, flat nose, or 2 pairs of whatever type you'd like, both chain nose or both flat nose. It doesn't really matter. Some round nose pliers, some wire cutters, and perhaps a pair of scissors. You will also need some Fireline or nanofill. I am using 10-pound nanofill. You can use 8-pound also. You can use 8 or 6-pound Fireline also. You will also need a beading needle. I'm using a size 10 beading needle, and you may want to have a ruler on hand also, just so that you can measure your strands as you make them and as you cut your wire. Let's go ahead and get started. We will start by making the beaded bead that we will need for this project. We will need 2 beaded beads. I've already made one. I will make another and show you how I made it. Okay, we will begin by threading a wingspan of thread onto your needle. A wingspan is when you spread your arms straight out, side to side, like you're going to fly away, and measure from fingertip the length of one arm across your chest, the length of the next arm, and to your fingertips. Just to make sure that you have enough thread on your needle, because you don't want to have to add thread while you're making your beaded bead. It's just easier if you don't have to. So we are going to start with 9 4-millimeter round crystals and some 11/0 seed beads. We're going to pick up onto our needle a seed bead. Oops, I got one mixed in there. An 11/0, a crystal, an 11/0, and a crystal, like so. Let's get a little closer as we begin this. Let me refocus my camera a little bit so that I have enough room. And here's what we have: 11/0 crystal, 11/0 crystal. These are my 4-millimeter round Swarovski crystals. I'm going to bring this down to the end of my thread. You do not have to leave a long tail, just enough to hold on to, and then come back through the first 2 beads, the 11/0 and the crystal, on your tail side, and bring the beads into a circle, and then continue through the 11/0 and the crystal you have not passed through yet. Once you get to the position where your working thread and your tail thread meet, we're going to tie a small knot just to hold everything together. Just a little overhand knot, and make sure that your knot goes down between the beads and not over them, and pull it tight. Now, your attention has to be really good on this particular part of the project. So we're going to sew through again and tighten these beads really well. Move my thread out of the way, and I'm just going to hold on with my thumb and my finger to make sure that I have good tension, and I'm just going to sew through all of these beads again, pulling them tightly together as I do this. I'm back where my tail and my working thread meet, so I'm now going to sew through this crystal and this 11/0 to get to the next part of my, or the next step to proceed actually. I want the tail to be on the outside here. And then I will pick up a crystal, an 11-0, and a, whoops, actually we need to go through the next crystal. Sorry about that. So we don't want to be in the 11-0, we want to be in the crystal, excuse me. And then pick up an 11-0, a crystal, and an 11-0. And we will be connecting to the crystals. Go down into the crystal. Had a bit of a momentary brain lapse there. So now I have gone through my 11-0, so I have attached to this crystal, went through the 11-0. I'm going to go back up through the crystal. I'm just going to sew through the beads I just added. As I do that, I will pull my thread tightly and secure them. Each sew through, you want to pull your thread so it pulls everything into line and makes them very tight. Now I'm coming out of the crystal I attached to. We are going to go into the 11-0 and back into the crystal that we just added. So up into this crystal now. And then pick up an 11-0 seed bead, a crystal, and 11-0 seed bead, and we will repeat the process. Go into the opposite side of the bead you're coming out of and pull your new beads down. And then sew back through all 3 beads you just added. So I'm just going to go through this 11-0. If it loosens, that's okay, because this is the step where you're going to tighten it. And then go through the 11-0 on this side. Up through the crystal we're attaching to. Give it a nice tug so that everything lays nice, and then go into the 11-0 here, and then back through the crystal. And again, 11-0, crystal, 11-0. Go into the opposite side of the bead you're coming out of. Pull these beads down, and then sew back through them. And attach them tightly, and secure them tightly. And we will continue doing this until we have all 9 of our crystals on our strip that we're creating here. So just go ahead and continue doing the exact same stitch until all 9 crystals are on the strip, and then we will be back. Okay, as you can see, I have made my strip with 9 crystals with the a little 11 O's on either side. So now we need to get this into a circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this tail down just so that it's not totally in my way, and then I'm leaving just a little tiny tag there so that it doesn't slip through, which it shouldn't at this point, but you never know. Now we're just going to take this, I'm coming out of the last crystal right here. We are going to pick up one 11-0 seed bead, and we are going to attach to the first crystal that we made on the same side we're coming out of. So we're coming out of this side of this crystal, we're going to go into this side of this crystal with an 11-0 seed bead on our thread, and then just slide up through this crystal on the tail side here and pull the crystals together like so, and then pick up another 11-0 seed bead and go into the crystal you started in on the same side you're coming out of the bead you're coming out of, and pull these into a circle. So now we have a circle of crystals, but it's loose and wobbly, so we need to sew through it and tighten it just like we have the other units. So just go ahead and sew all the way around all the beads in this last unit that we're joining together here. Pull it very tightly, and I'm just even going to go ahead and sew through one more time, and then I will sew up into the next crystal and then the next 11-0 next to it, so that I am away from the joint I just created, and I can start my next step. At this point, I'm going to take my dowel and I'm just going to put it on the edge, my little circle on the edge of it, so that you can see what I'm doing and it stays organized and easy to follow. So I'm coming out of this little 11-0 seed bead here. I'm going to get you in pretty close, and now we're going to do some right angle weave with 11-0 seed beads. So get some 11-0 seed beads out, and we're going to start with 1 unit of right angle weave here. This is our first bead. We will pick up 3 more. Each unit will have 4 beads in it. We already have a bead on here, so we're going to pick up 3. We're coming out of this side of this little bead. We're going to go into the opposite side of the bead and pull this down into a unit of right angle weave, like so. But now we need to secure it because it is still rather wobbly. So I'm just going to sew back through it, and I will tighten it as I sew back through. You can't really tighten each or pull each one, so just go all the way through, and then we'll pull it as we go through the bead we're attaching to tighten it. So now I can give it a good little tug and tighten it into a nice little unit like so. And then I need to continue to my next bead. So I am in this base unit bead here. I'm going to go up into this side bead right here and pull my thread through. Now I am going to use this bead and this bead in my next unit. So if I have 2 beads and my total of a unit is 4 beads, I need to pick up 2. Since I'm coming out of this bead up and away, I will pick up the 2 beads first. So if your thread is coming out and it's pointing away from you, away from the dowel, then you will pick up 2 beads. And that will make sense in a moment. So I have 2 beads. I'm going to go into this one on my unit right here. And then I'm going to pull it down. Now I have my second unit, but I need to attach it to the bead I started in. So I'm going to go up into this bead here. Give it a tug. Make sure there's good tension. Now I need to get over to this bead to connect to this bead in my next unit. So I will sew up into this one, down into this one, and then into this one here. Now I need to pick up 2 11-0 seed beads. My thread is coming out, pointing away from me. There is a time that you can be sewing through and your thread will be coming out the opposite direction, and then you will need to pick up 2 beads last. But in the sequence, or the way we're doing it now, we will pick up the 2 beads before going into the next bead, always. So pick up 2 beads. I know that seems a little confusing, but just go ahead and pick up your 2 beads, and then we're going to sew up into the next bead. Tighten your thread, and then go up into the side bead. Sorry, using a dowel on camera is kind of hard. And I like to go through just one bead at a time because it keeps my units nice and neat, like so. Now I need to connect to my next bead, so I'll pick up 2 beads, and then I'll go into the bead on the unit here. And then into the bead that I started in. And then again into the side bead, so I have to go into the top. We have to get over to this side bead here so that we can do our next unit. So we're going to go here, then into our next 11-0 on the next unit there, and pick up 2 11-0 seed beads. Go back into the bead we started in, pull, and then back into the bead on the unit, and then up through the side bead. So we're just making right angle weave connected to itself. Pick up 2 11-0 seed beads, go into the bead on your next unit here. Then back into the bead you connected to originally, up into the top bead, and if you notice I am securing each stitch as I do this by taking my thread lightly, and go into the side bead, into the next bead on the next unit. And as you do this and as you tighten it, your bead should start to curve in. You can see how my beads are starting to curve over the top of my dowel. Pick up 2 11-0 seed beads and back into the bead you started in. And as I tug, my little 11-0s are curving over the top. Then, got to get into the side bead here. I will pick up 2 11-0 seed beads, go into the bead on my dowel here, up into the bead I started in my previous unit, sew around to the side bead. Now I have made it all the way around, and I'm going to show you what I mean. Got to get in my side bead here. So all I have left now is 1 bead on my original units. So if I have a bead here, a bead here, and a bead here, I can join them together, and all I have to do is add 1 bead for the top. So instead of picking up beads, I'm going to go into this bead here, then I'm going to go into the bead on the very first unit we created, the side bead, and now I have 3 beads in my unit that I am now creating, and all I have to do is pick up 1. So pick up 1 bead, then I'm going to sew back into the 3 beads in the unit that I'm creating. So I'm going to go into this side bead here, pull this down, give a little tug, and then go into the bead on my original units on the bottom here, go into the side bead from my very first unit I created, give a little tug, and then I'm going to go into the top bead. Now I'm finished creating the right angle weave all the way around. So I'm coming out of this top bead here. In order to secure everything, I'm going to sew down into the next unit of right angle weave here. I don't know if I can get you any closer without blurring, but I'm in this top bead. I'm now going to go into the side bead again, right here. Make sure all your beads are nice and tight. This has to be tight or it's not going to work. go into the bottom bead in your unit that you're now in, go into the side bead here, and then sew back into the top bead right here. Now, what we're going to do is sew each of these top beads in our top units. So you can see each of the top beads in the units are laying on the top of my dowel here. I'm going to sew into each one and pull them together. And you can take it off the dowel at this point if you would like. I'm going to leave it on while I sew around, and then once I get all the way around, I can take it off and pull them tight together like so. Let's see. To make sure you can see what I'm doing. So I am coming out of this bead right here. I'm going to go into the next one and the one after that. Doesn't matter how many you go through, because you're going to go through all of them. Every single, make sure you don't grab side beads, just the top beads. Now I'm going to take it off and then sew around these top beads one more time. You can see what I'm doing. I have to hold my thumb over it for a moment and just pull it really tightly. And I'll go all the way around one more time, making sure that all of these beads are pulling together, and what that is doing is creating a little cup like so. Once I feel like I have this secure enough, then I will sew down into one of the right angle weave units here. So let me get through the next two beads. Okay. I'm going to give it one more little tug here. And now you can see I'm coming out of this bead right here, and I'm going to sew down into this unit of right angle weave. You don't want to cross your thread path. You want to stay in the original thread path. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming out of this bead right here. Yep. So I'm going to go down into this bead here. Then I'm going to go into the bottom bead that was originally between the crystals in our first units, and then I'm going to go down into the crystal. And it doesn't matter what unit you come out of, just make sure you sew back through whatever unit you're in until you're coming out of a crystal. Then we will turn it over and go through, there's my little original tail tag there. Yeah, I'll just leave it. Go through an 11-0 seed bead. If you'd like, you can put it back on your dowel like so. Let me back off. And begin your next side of a right angle weave. And we're going to do exactly the same thing we just did. We need to start with a unit of right angle weave. So I'm picking up 3 beads since I'm only working out of 1 right now. And I'm going to go into the opposite side of the bead I'm coming out of and pull my needle through. Oops, I'm around my dowel. Hang on just a second. There we go. Now I need to secure this unit of right angle weave, so I'll just sew back through it. Sorry guys, I'm not used to working on a dowel, but as you can see, trying to stay in camera and trying to keep all this together is a little too much coordination for me. There we go. All the way through this unit. And now I can sew down into this side bead here. However, I believe that's a 15-0 that got mixed in with my beads. So what I need to do is pull this out. People always say, why don't you show us how you fixed it so that we can see? Well, I'm just going to pull it out. So now you can see. And then I will put that unit back together and start again. Rethread my needle. And start another unit of right angle weave. A lot of times my 11-0s and 15-0s get mixed together, and then I end up picking up one end. And that's happened from previous projects. When I put them away, they got messed up. That's why I like the little bead tray that I'm using right now. If you noticed, it was the No More Oops tray. That's helping me a lot to avoid this issue because I have this issue quite often. So I have sewn back through my unit now, and now I will come up through the side bead here. I will pick up 2 11-0 seed beads and then go into the next bead on my unit. I'm just going to get rid of the dowel, and then back into the bead I'm connecting to. And then I will give it a little tug and sew through the top bead here, into the side bead here, and begin again by going into the next bead. Now, once you go into the next bead, give a nice tight little tug so that your previous unit is nice and secure, and begin again. Pick up 2 11-0 seed beads. And you will continue doing this exactly like you did the other side. If you have any issues, just back up the video and watch how we did the other side. We'll go all the way around. Once we get to the last unit, I will be back and I will show you how to connect the last unit one more time. And then we will sew through and knot off, and we will be done with our beaded bead. Okay, so I have gone all the way around. I have just one bead left on my original units between my crystals here, and I have a bead here and a bead here on the other side for my two units, my starting unit and my last unit, and I'm going to connect them together just like I did on the other side. So I'm coming out of this side bead in this last unit of right angle weave right here. I'm going to go down into the bead here on my unit between the crystals, and then I'm going to go up into the side bead on the first unit I created. I'm going to pick up 1 11-0 seed bead and go down into the side bead here. So I'm coming out of this side, I'm going to go into this side and pull this down. And then I'll go back through the crystal on the bottom between, or not the crystal, the 11-0 between the crystals, and then I will sew through this unit one more time to secure it. So I'll go through all 4 beads that create this last unit here. And once I get into this side unit, I'm going to start sewing into the previous unit, just to be a unit away from my last one and to be more secure. So I'm going to sew down into this one here, and then go all the way around it just to secure it. Make sure that everything's tight. So I'll go through all 4 beads on this little unit here. Once I get to the top bead, I will exit, pull my thread through, and then begin sewing through all the top beads right here in the middle and pulling them together. So I'm going to go into the next one here, and here, and look at them carefully because some of them kind of push in a little bit or they're a little out of place, and you want to go through all of them. You don't want to go through any of your side beads in your units, but you want to make sure that you pass through each and every top bead, and they don't always lay in an order where it looks like you're in the beads. So just pay attention and pull them all together. Once you get all the way around, you can go around again, pull tightly, make sure you have really good tension. Okay, so I'm all the way around. Now I'm going to sew down into the side arm here of the unit I'm in. Here. I'm going to sew over into the original bead between the crystals in the unit I'm in, and then I'm going to grab this little thread bridge right here between the crystal and the 11-0 seed bead right here. Like so. So I'm just on that little thread bridge. Be careful not to pull everything out of whack trying to do this, and just pull a tight little knot down there. Go back up into one of your side beads and back into one of your units of right angle weave. Sew through that unit. Go down into the bead between the crystals. Go down into one of the crystals and cut your thread off. Burn it down. Just let the thread melt in, don't light it on fire, and there is your beaded bead. Make 2 of them exactly the same, like so, and set them aside. Once you have made both of your beaded beads, you will begin the process of making the stringing portion of the necklace. So we will be back and begin that portion. Okay, to begin the next portion of our necklace, we're going to wrap a loop on the little pieces of wire that we cut a little over 2 inches long. So this is not quite 2.5 inches long. I'm going to go about 1 inch down on the wire. Maybe not quite 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch, something like that. And then I'm just going to push the wire over the back part of my round nose plier. So right over like that. And then I'm going to turn my hand just very gently, and notice that I'm only about 1/8 of an inch down on my round nose pliers, because the further back you go, the bigger of a circle you're going to get, and you don't want a big loop for this, a fairly small one, so that your beaded bead will slide over it. So now I am in the portion of the wire that I have bent, and now I'm just going to bring the wire over the round nose plier and then turn my hand slightly like so and bring the piece of wire that you're bending underneath the round nose pliers. Then you just have a little loop, see? And now you're going to grab a hold of your flat nose pliers and hold on to that loop you just made. Bring the tail piece of wire up against your flat nose pliers parallel. Move back a little bit so that you can actually work with it. Switch hands. Grab your round nose pliers or your chain nose pliers, it doesn't matter, and just take about 1.5 loops around the tail wire here. Like so. Now I'm just going to cut the excess that I have hanging out with my end cutters, and then I'm going to grab my chain nose and squish that little sharp piece down. This is what I have, a little loop here. And now you're going to make exactly the same thing with your other piece of wire. So go ahead and grab your other piece of wire and make another loop, and we'll be back. Make sure as you're making your loops that they're about the same size. Okay, so as you can see, I've made my 2 loops, and they're pretty close in size. One's a little bit prettier round than the other, but if you find that that's an issue, that it's not round enough, you can always put it back on your round nose pliers and just kind of straighten it out. But it's really not important for this. You're not going to see it. So just get them as neat as you possibly can. Set one aside, and we will begin by picking up one of our 14-inch wires. So pick up one that you've cut that's 14 inches long. There we go. I think I just threw one on the floor. That's okay. I'll find it. Then get out one of your, let me back off here. Get out one of your crimp beads. Like I said, I'm using a little round size 1. And if you want to use a size 2, then go ahead and do that. Just go ahead and crimp it with your crimping tool like you would normally do. With this one, I am just going to pick it up. I'm going to put my crimp bead onto my wire. I'm going to go through the loop that I made on my piece of wire, and then I'm going to pull or push the end of my beading wire through the crimp bead, and then pull on the longer end until I have this little piece of, or this little loop pretty close to the loop of wire. Let me show you. You don't want it to be really tight. You want it to have some movement. See if you can see how big that is. But you don't want your loop to be huge either. You just want it to be enough to where your wire can move on your loop of wire. Now I'm just going to pick up my chain nose pliers, and I am going to squish this little crimp bead. Now if you can get your wires parallel, that's great. If you can't, they're crossed, that's okay too. When you squish it like this, it's kind of hard to get them parallel. So I'm just going to leave it crossed, and I am going to squish. And this is what I have. Now, if I had it parallel, this wouldn't be jutting out so bad, and I could slide some of my first beads over it. But because it is, I'm going to have to cut it off. I'm just going to make sure that this is nice and secure and that it's not moving. I'm going to cut this tail off, like so. And then I'm going to pick up 3 11/0 seed beads onto my wire. And slide them down. And then I will just begin stringing my crystals onto my wire. So I have my 3 11/0s and my wire, and then I'm just going to start picking up my crystals. Now you can use, like I said, any beads that you want to use. I'm going to use 2 sizes of these rondelles, and they're really pretty close in size, so you won't really be able to tell the difference unless you're picking up the necklace and looking at it. But I'm going to go ahead and string until I get about 2 inches from the end of my wire. And then I will be back and show you what to do next. So just continue threading whatever beads it is that you're using for your project until you get 2 inches from the end, and we'll be back. Okay, so now I have strung on the beads that I want on this piece of wire, and my beads are making about 12 inches from the loop here to the end, a little bit over 12 inches. And then I am going to string on 3 11/0 seed beads. Now, you can make these any length you want. You can make them much longer. You can make them a little shorter. However, you want whatever length you want your necklace to end up with. And these are going to hang down in the middle, and then we will make from this point up what goes around our neck. So this is what the portion that's going to be in the middle of the necklace. So if you want it to be very long, it can be very long. If you want it to be a little shorter, it can be a little shorter. Just keep in mind that this is totally adjustable. You can do it any way you want to do it. Use any beads you want to do it. However, this does not have to be done exactly like I'm doing it. It is the technique I'm showing you more than being specific about beads. Now I'm going to pick up one little crimp bead again and the other end of my wire. I'm going to string on the crimp bead and pick up my other loop here and go through my loop. And you want to make sure you leave a little bit of slack here. Try to go through one of your 11 O's if possible. If not, don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter. And I'm not going to be able to, so I'm just going to pull this end here through my crimp bead, which can take a little bit of manipulation. And then you want to make this loop basically the same size as the loop on the other side around your wire loop. So just make sure that they're about the same size. You can compare them. Mine isn't quite there yet. And you also want to leave a little bit of slack in your line. Not a ton, just a little bit, so that the beads can move around fluidly on your wire. And then I will look on this side, make sure that my loop around my wire loop is about the same size, and it is. Maybe a little bit smaller. And then I will grab my chain nose pliers and I will squish this crimp bead very tightly and cut off the end of the wire here. And as you can see, I'll get you close, there is a little bit of slack in my wire. So you can see it's not really tight. I can move my beads around, and that's what this looks like. Now you're going to make 3 of those and attach them exactly the same way. So go ahead and get another piece of your 14-inch wire, put it on your loop, string it, but on your second and third strand you want to make the beads just a little bit less or a little bit more than your first strand, so that when they lay together, they don't lay right on top of each other. You don't want them to be exactly the same count of beads. So if you want to, you can count how many beads you have on here, and then you can subtract a couple on your next strand. Or as you're doing this, you're going to connect your next wire. As you're doing it, you can lay it next to the strand that you've already created and decide that you like whether it's laying the way that you want it to or not, and then end it when you think you have the appropriate amount of beads. So each one is just a little bit different count of beads than the previous one, so that they don't lay on top of each other. Also, when you're crimping, you can crimp one on one side of the strand that you started. So my crimp bead's right here, my loop is right here. I can crimp it on this side and then crimp it on the inside on this side. That will cross them a little bit, and I will show you what I mean as soon as I get a couple more strands made. But go ahead and make your 2 more strands, make them just slightly different in the count of beads, and then we will be back. Okay, so as you can see, I finished my 3 strands. Now, this is what I was talking about, making each strand just a little bit different length than the previous strand, so that they don't lay directly on top of each other. You want them to be a little bit different in length so that they are spread out a little bit. And if you want them to crisscross, as mine have been doing, that is done while you're crimping. You just change the order on your second side crimping than you did on your first side. So if you crimped one to the outside, then when you crimp it on your other side, you'll crimp it to the inside. So you're just basically arranging your strands to do whatever you want them to do. So they're going to be laying side by side as you're doing this. So you can, if you have your first strand on, you can take your second strand and put it underneath and then over and then crimp it. And then do the same with your third strand. So it just depends on what order you crimp them in, how they lay. Now there's a million different possibilities, so I didn't include how to do that as I was doing it. I didn't show you each and every crimp. You will have to figure that out on your own. It's not difficult. You just lay them out, or you just crimp them in a different order than you crimp the first side. It does not matter. Or you can crimp them all in the same. You can make sure they're laid out perfectly straight. Like this, as you're doing it, you can make sure that each strand is straight across when you crimp it, and then they won't crisscross. Or you can make sure that you crimp one on one side and one on the next side, however you want to do it. You will be able to figure it out. I am confident in that. So, now, this is the way that I've decided I wanted mine to look. And my next step now is to grab one of my beaded beads and to slide it over this looped area, because as you can see, it's not very pretty. Let me get it up to you so you can see it. It's just not all that gorgeous. So I wanted to hide it, so that's why I created this little crimped bead here, or this little beaded bead here, and just slide it right over the loop of my wire. And then I'm going to pick up one of my rondelles and put it on here. And then I think I'm going to use one of my rounds. You can use whatever you want. You don't even have to put any on there if you don't want to, but that I think is kind of pretty. So then I'm going to grab my round nose pliers and I'm going to put the small end just a little bit away from the small end here, and I'm going to bend it over because I don't want a big wire wrap here, just a very small one. Then I'm going to move my pliers into the bent area, wrap it over the top. I want it to be a small loop, so I'm just going to go over the top and then around the bottom while I turn my wrist a little bit. And see, I have a small little loop here. I'm going to take my pliers and bend my wire up parallel to it, see, and then around. I just want a small wrap. The problem is this moves around on here a lot, so it's hard to figure out exactly how much you want wrapped. I'm just going to try to do a small wrap like this. I don't want a ton of wire on there. I don't think it's pretty. So I'm just going to play with this a little bit until I'm happy with it, which I'm never going to be because I don't really like the look of wire wraps. But that's the way this has to be, the way I've designed it. So there. So I've got this little wire wrap like this. And then you can play with your bead until you get it in the position you want it. Because it kind of squishes and unsquishes, so you're just going to have to play with it until it's where you want it to be. And then do the other side exactly the same way. Slide your bead on, slide your two little beads on the top of that, and then do your wire wrap. And go ahead and do the second side, and we'll be back. Okay, so I've gone ahead and wrapped both sides now. And now all we need to do is string something, or you could attach a chain on here even to go up around the neck. If you want to, you can just open up a chain and put it on here, or you can do some more stringing. Take one of your, if you want to string, take one of your 12mm wires that you have cut and grab one of your crimp beads, and you may even want to throw a crimp cover into the mix now. I think I'll get one out and I'll show you how to use that too. But first, let's grab a crimp bead And just put this through the loop. Slide your wire through your crimp bead. If I can do it. I don't think I'm coordinated anymore. It just went away. There we go. Slide this down. Pull the longer wire. Organize it. Make a nice little loop. You don't want it to be a big loop. But again, you want to be able to have it move on the wire loop. So make it the appropriate size so that it's not huge, but it's not so tight that it doesn't move. And then grab your pliers. See if I can get this. If you get your wires somewhat parallel, they will not, and not twisted, they won't stick out, jut out like I showed you on the very first one. You want them to kind of lay next to each other before you crimp it instead of crossing each other. And then squish that crimp. And then I will see how that laid nicely. Now, instead of sticking straight out like the first one I showed you, the first one I knew better, but I did it anyway. So anyway, that's how you fix that problem. And then I'm going to slide a 4mm round on here just because I want to slide this bead through it, or slide the wire through it. And then I'm going to cut this wire. And then I'm just going to begin stringing my rondelles on here. And I may decide to make some head pin little dangles to put on this loop to cover this wire wrap too. And I'll show you how to do that. I think I might do that because I just, with this type of necklace, with as pretty and crystally as it is, I think the wire wrap is a little too, not quite, it's too rustic or something looking, I don't know, not quite elegant enough. So I will figure out a way to fix that, and I will show you what I do. And of course you can do the same thing. You'll just need some more head pins, or you can just leave it like this. Again, I'm just showing you a technique, and you can make this any way you want. That's the beauty in stringing, is as long as you just have kind of an idea of where you want to go with it, you can take it any direction you want. So I'm going to continue stringing until I get the length that I think is appropriate for my necklace. I will tell you what length I stop at, and I will be back at that point. Okay, so as you can see, I started stringing the top part of my necklace, but I've decided before I forget to put a crimp bead on my crimp, or a crimp cover on my crimp bead. So I am going to grab my Mighty Crimpers, and I'm going to use them. They're just a great big crimp plier. You can use your regular pliers too. It doesn't matter. Grab a crimp bead, and I'm just, or not a crimp bead, a crimp cover, excuse me, and place it over the crimp bead, and then just squeeze it shut over the crimp bead. I like to use the Mighty Crimpers because it's just easier. Not that it looks like it right now, but it actually is. And place this right over my crimp bead, close it. That will help this look a little prettier too. And then squeeze my beads back down over the tail wire here. There. So that's how you'll do your little crimp bead or your crimp cover bead. Just squeeze it around your crimp. You can use your regular pliers too. You don't have to use Mighty Crimpers. You can do it however you would like to do it, but that's how that looks. And then I'm going to string this just a little bit longer, and I think I want this necklace to hang down quite a ways on the chest. Let me see where I want it. don't want it to be just a color length type thing. I want it to be longer for like a sweater. So I'm going to go ahead and string a few more on, and we'll be back. I have strung about 7.5 inches of beads from my loop here all the way to the end of my beads. And this altogether is going to be about a 30-inch necklace, so it'll hang down lower on the chest. And like I said, you can make it any length you want. And then I am going to, that's why I'm not giving you numbers of beads either. Just make sure you have a whole lot of whatever bead you start out with. And make it whatever length you want according to how many beads you have, according to what you think it would be pretty. You could make this quite short and make this more of a collar type necklace, or a 20-inch necklace, or any length you would like. I just want it to be longer. I'm making this for my mother, and she likes the longer ones to wear over her sweaters, so that's what this is going to be. Now I'm going to pick up a crimp bead. Well, first I think I'll put a 4mm round here just to end this pretty. And then I'm going to pick up a crimp bead. Slide it down. And then I'm going to put on my lobster claw clasp. So I'm just going to slide this through like so, and then slide it through my crimp bead and the 4mm round bead. If I can get it through here. And I also got it through one of my rondelles, which is fine. You'll want to remember to leave a little bit of slack in your line so that your beads move around nicely without breaking your wire or doing anything crazy like that. Make your loop around your lobster claw so it can move. So don't make it real tight. Don't make it huge either, of course. That should be enough slack in that line there. And then, let me pull that a little tighter. That's not quite, there we go. And then I'm going to crimp this off. My chain nose pliers, if I can find them. I'm just going to squeeze this. Try to make my wires parallel. And squeeze this really secure. And then I will put a crimp cover on that also. First, let me cut this down. Tuck that wire in. And so you can see I have a tiny bit of slack in there. And then I'm going to grab my crimp cover and put this over my crimp bead. And this time I'm just using my pliers so you can see. You can do either, it doesn't matter. I just think these work better. Squish it all out of whack here. Okay, I hope you can see that. I usually get out of camera when I'm doing stuff like that. But I just put the cover over the crimp bead. And now you can see that I have one end completely finished of my necklace. I'll show you what it looks like. I'll get some of these beads out of the way. And that's what it looks like so far. And I will go ahead and do the other side, and be back. Okay, so now you can see I have finished. I went ahead and strung this side, and then I just attached my chain the same way I attached my lobster claw clasp, just directly to my beading wire, crimped it and put a little bead cover over it. And now I'm just going to make something pretty to dangle off the end of it with my head pin. So I'm just going to pick up one of my rondelles and then one of my 4mm round beads. And I'm just going to bend this over like so and cut it. It's about 1/4 of an inch, not quite, probably 1/8 of an inch, something like that. And then I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, go to the very end of that piece that I cut, and start to turn it until I get a loop. So I should have given myself a little bit more room there, but that's okay. And so now I have a little loop. Let me show you. That's what that looks like. And then I'm just going to grab my pliers here, open it, and put it on my chain. And then close it. Now I have a pretty little decoration at the end of my chain. Show you what it looks like. And this is what this looks like. It's a nice long 30-inch necklace, and it can be even longer because I put a chain on it, so it can be adjusted to be whatever length. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I think it turned out really pretty, and I had mentioned maybe putting some dangles or some little head pin connections here to cover the wire, and I tried it and I didn't like it, so I decided not to do that. So if you're thinking about that, that's why I didn't do that. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this project. See you later. Bye bye.